So progress has been made. When I left you last time, I was just starting this row here. As you can see, it undulates and kisses back against the first row in a couple of positions. So I stitched them all on and ran the needle through again to even them all up. I've then put another row of the shiny purple at the bottom, again just touching on the row I'd made previously. Those are size 8s as well. And at the top I've added another row of those lovely metallic size 8s, again touching back or kissing against that first row of shiny purple AB 8s that I put on. Now at this stage I've decided that this will in all likelihood be the top of the bead and this will be the bottom. So if this is the top, I want to perhaps now think about putting lighter colours towards that end and darker colours towards this end. But I'm not exactly sure at the moment. I'll see how it goes. However, if we have a closer look at the beaded bead itself, we can see we're starting to get quite a good covering over the mesh. We're starting to create nice shaped pockets, and in some places like here we've already got quite a neat pocket that might be suitable for taking a couple of our feature beads. So if I start to drop that in there, particularly if I put a couple of seed beads at either end and just drop that in there, you can see how that's starting to take up that space. However, I could perhaps extend it with more feature beads like that, but I think I might want a little bit more seed bead detail in there first. So I need to start reducing down further all of these areas. I'm going to now move down to the smaller of the seed beads I've got, which is a size 10. You might be an 11, it might be another size 8 you want to use, and I've come up in the corner of one of these areas. I'm going to start backstitching again. I'm going to use this nice oily green, and that's where I've come out, so I'm just going to start backstitching again. So start with a running stitch, 2 beads on, back through the last one of the previous stitch, and then forwards again. Now this is where you might want to swap to one of those older needles you've got that's a little bit bent. I've got lots of very bent needles, but it helps you to dig the needle in and out, so I never throw away a bent needle. So another 2 beads on, back through one and forward to emerge just ahead. Now I started parallel there, but I'm diverging because I'm going to come up to meet this here and down again to further subdivide this area into 2 zones, and then I can pass on to the next one and do similar. So I'll finish this zone and come back and show you what I've achieved. So I've been working in this oily green, and you can see I've made a little undulating line through this space here, and I've carried it on until I've petered out and run out of space, and then I've swapped into the next void, and it's almost as though you're sort of going underneath or over the top, and in this case underneath, and I've continued the line into the next void, and I will continue on around. You can see that's the end or the beginning of the row, so if I come up through here and a few beads there, I'll be able to join it on to the end of that. Now it's important to note I haven't actually put seed beads on top of seed beads because that makes it too bulky, so I've passed actually through this bead here to transfer from one section to the other. If you try to go over the top, it just doesn't look right. All you see is the thread. So I'd advise you to either go through the mesh underneath the bead or go through the bead itself. Also, to keep it neat in places, as you can see perhaps there, I've square stitched these 3 greeny beads to those 2 purple ones just to keep it nice and parallel and neat, and that makes the beadwork a little bit firmer. Right, so I've broken down rather this larger area which is bounded by the matte purple and the metallic. I've broken that down now into 3 smaller areas, and these 2 areas are probably just about right for some of our embellishment beads, our extra selection of goodies. This one is still probably too large, but I'll have a little experiment and see. However, so you can see what we're trying to achieve, I'm going to add a couple of feature beads into these holes, and you can see how the pattern starts to build up. So for this first one here, I've brought the needle back to the beginning, and it's a very long, narrow shape. So I could perhaps put in a couple of seed beads, or I could put in a small, large, small seed bead combination like that. But I had a little play, and actually what I like is one of these oval metal beads. It's just the right shape, and I think just the right colour to go in there. So I need to bring my needle to the right place to start and just stitch it on. I'm going to go through to the next section. There we go. You can see how nicely that pulls up to the surface of the base bead, and it smooths out the rows of seed beads around it. Now I've got another similar shape section. Now again, I could put in, I actually had a little play, and something like a faceted bead actually fitted quite nicely, but I hadn't got anything to go either side. That was a 6mm, so I dropped it down to a 4mm and put another one of those ovals in, and I really like that. Now, do I want it that way round or that way round? I think that way. Take a stitch. And there we go. So you can now see we've filled in those 2 spaces. Now I'm going to continue on with this little green row and just complete that connection. You don't have to, but I'd rather like to. And then I'm going to add in another few rows like this to start to break down these larger areas. Once I've done that, I'll come back to you and show you my progress. So I've been working on my beaded bead, and I've added several rows of size 10 seed beads, which has started to cut down the area occupied by those big voids, so they're being sliced into smaller and smaller voids. If I take the needle out, you can see I've got a small ring quite close to the top hole, and that's broken that down into smaller areas, and there's another section coming off here. You can see how it's starting to break down those large areas that we had before into smaller and smaller pockets. Now I've continued to work in sort of continuous lines around, so the end of that pale line does join up again. It just gives us some continuity, and it helps you to plan your beading a little bit better. So that again, that dark purple line winds all the way around and back to where we began. Now that's starting to bring these areas down quite successfully. On the other end of the bead, you can see I've progressed a bit further. I've brought the areas down smaller and smaller. Those are the few feature beads we added in before, and now I've added in a few more. I've used the size 6 and a facet to fill in that area, a couple of facets and a couple of 6mm beads, and again I've reintroduced the larger seed beads to help me neaten off around the hole. So you can see I'm starting to get the effect that I was after at this end of the bead. I now need to start to distribute some feature beads around this sort of area. So I'm going to put my needle back in, just because I don't want the pressure I put on the beadwork to start to close in over the hole. Now I've got my thread attached and I've got this area here, and I've had a little play with my feature beads that I'd selected before, and some of them I'm just going to discard because they're too big. So as pretty as they are, I think they're too big. That one is quite okay, but I don't want anything bigger than that. And the same bead in the olive I think is too bright. So although they're both 2-hole candy beads, I think that one works and that one doesn't. But I've ended up with a small selection of beads that I think will work. Right, now where's my section? There it is. I quite like the bluing because the blue is going to go in the tassel strands further down, and I need to bring the two themes together. That works rather well. That's a little pip bead, and as you can see it's copper on one side and blue on the other. That's quite nice, but a little bit bulbous. Now I know that will work, but I want something more textural, so I'll probably go back to a faceted bead, and let's have a look at, yes, the olive one works quite well. Now if I put that in on its own, it leaves a space either side, so I'm going to think about either putting one of these in, not really, or a couple of seed beads. So let's have a little look at that as a combination. That's nearly right. Let's try 2 of those and 1 of those. It's a lot of experimentation, and that's pretty good, I think. So I'm going to stretch those across that space and try and come up in this next one here. Now you can see the shape of my needle has gone a little bit wonky, and that's just because I've been working around these smaller spaces, and I'm quite happy with that. Now I've got a little space here. I could put a slim bead in. So let's pick up one of those ovals again. I think that works quite well. So let's put an oval in. And you can see that also pulled that one in a bit tighter. That's working quite well. Right, now we're in this space here. This is a bigger space, so it might need another little bit of seed beads in, but let's have a little look. What might work in this space? Let's have a look at a little. That's too round, or too flat rather. I think that one worked quite well. And there's a faceted version as well. I think the plain one. Let's have a little look. Now that's fitting quite well. I'm going to take the needle out so you can see it better. You can see it's still got some space around it. So I'm going to have a look at putting some seed beads either side And looking at what I've got around already, I'm thinking perhaps this dark purple. Let's have a look at that. Yes, that makes that pop. So let's take that stitch, come out over here. Now you can see there's still space around there, so I can come back and start to fill in with some more seed beads or perhaps some more feature beads. So I could potentially get a little feature bead in there, but I think I'm going to do this with seed beads. Now I haven't used this olive yet, that's a little bit too bright, so let's have a look at, yeah, that's quite good. So let's pop that one in there. And you can see I'm having to take the stitch and the needle emerges where the needle will, and then I can just take a stitch back to get back to the space I need to be in. Right, now I've got this space here and a space there, so I think I'm going to double up on my purple beads and go back through here. That's filled that space in quite nicely. I've got a little space there, so let's put another purple one in. And now I'm going to head back to this void. Now can you see the needle is jamming against that bead there? I can't come out in the place I want very easily. You can help yourself by using a pair of pliers just to grab the end of the needle. And now I just need something in that space, so I could go for that, or yes, let's put on that little bead. I want it to show front ways out, so I need something for the centre. I'm going to use a dark green, and I'm going to go back down through the flower and out somewhere else. And that pulls that little flower up into the space. You can see I've filled in that area. I'm quite happy with that. Right, now I need to move on. I've got a space there. I might need to subdivide that a little bit. I did fancy putting that one in there. And then I can subdivide this area. And I shall carry on working round until I've filled in all these voids. I'm going to have to reintroduce that pale bead down here somewhere just to bring everything together. But it shouldn't take me long now, and it's rather fun. Back in a bit to show you the progress. And here I'm glad to say is the finished beaded bead. I've filled in all the remaining gaps, and I've put in a few extra lines of seed beads so that the wire mesh is completely covered. Now, if I take out the needle, you can see the space around what will be the top hole on the design. And you can see it's covered all the way to the hole in the bead, and the same on the bottom. Now, although if you look really closely, you can just about see the wire in effect from a distance of more than a few inches. It's completely concealed. Now, I'm quite pleased with that. I hope you'll give it a go. In the next video, I'll be showing you how I construct the tassel strands that come out of the bottom, and we'll be picking up on these same themes and returning to our original bead palette. Thank you for watching, and happy beading!